Hey there, this is Brent Hoodenpyle with another episode of Persuading for Profits. Thank you guys for joining us today. I am here with Mr. Ed Winslow. He is the author of Proof Stacking. He's the designer, I guess, creator of the one-page case study that closes deals, and he is a kind of a unique voice in the sales and marketing world. And I really appreciate him being on today. Ed, welcome to the call.
Oh, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I'd love to tell the story.
Very cool. Yeah, we were just talking a little bit, and tell me. So, our broadcast is hosted on Radio Update, the publication for radio executives and people like that. People in radio may not know of you and what you do. Can you give us a little background about yourself, and then we will tie this in, because I think that what you do. We're really trying to help radio salespeople and station managers get more advertisers for their station. And I think what you do is something that radio could desperately use and to great benefit for themselves. So give us a little background on yourself, if you don't mind, Ed.
Yeah, okay. So I come out of the real estate business. I started with a company called CBRE, big commercial real estate company. At the time, it was Coldwell Banker.
Right.
That's how long ago it was. And I think
Right.
I think it was Sears that bought Coldwell Banker. They bought the residential side, and they didn't want to have a conflict with the commercial side, so Coldwell Banker Commercial became CB. And sort of interesting, when I started at CB, like the first job out of college, I've got my one suit. I walk into the office. I'd never been in an office before. And the receptionist sits me in the conference room, and this guy walks in, and he looks down at me and he says, we're the largest and most successful commercial real estate company in the world for one reason. We have a system. If you follow the system, you will succeed. If you deviate, if you think you're smarter than us, or you know it another way, or you're going to cut corners, you're going to fail. So
Right.
you think you can handle following a system? And I'm like, this is like 15 minutes in, and I'm like, well, of course, I said yes. And, so that really made a big impact on me. And the thing about, the real estate business, it's a very local business.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's always local. I mean, it's changed a little bit over the years where, because I think it's because of the internet has enabled people to get a bigger reach. So people can specialize in different, bigger properties on larger geographic areas, but the majority of business is local.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a commercial
Right.
real estate broker, you're going to focus on a small area.
Right.
I mean, that's the key. But the same sales model applies to every kind of commercial business, way, especially service businesses, home-based service businesses, lawyers, accountants, contractors of all kinds. And so the model applies to everybody. But, what I did, was really interesting when I went to work with a guy named Bob Knackel, who has I was at Coldwell, CB for a year. I got to know Bob Knackel, who was in New York City, who had started a niche business selling small to mid-sized buildings in New York. And I was in New Jersey, and I wanted to learn from Bob, so I used to go in on Saturdays, and I would sit with him and help him with his things. And about a year later, he started his own boutique firm, and I went to work with him. I just really believed in what he was doing and the system that he had developed. And we were always content marketers.
Okay.
We were always writing articles and newsletters and market reports and success stories. I mean, that's what we did. We didn't have a name for it. We just did it.
Right. The OG content marketing, right?
Yeah. So what was really amazing was, early on in the early 90s, when I was sort of just getting going, it was very tough to do business back then. We were coming off that savings and loan crisis.
Right.
And I sold a property, and, I just got real lucky. I sold this one property, and I'm walking back to the office with my commission check in my pocket. And after I sort of sobered up from the excitement, I realized, I got to sell more of these. How do I get more?
Right.
So I can go back to, cold calling, stuffing envelopes, that kind of thing. And I had this idea. I don't know where I got the idea. And I went back to the office and I got out like a white piece of copy paper and I sat down and I jotted down the key parts about the property. Not so much like the salesy stuff, but more about the history of the property. It was sort of an
Right.
interesting property in New York. And I put it in an 8 by 11 envelope and with a picture of the building, and I sent it into the New York Times. And two months later, they published it exactly as I wrote it on the
That
front
is
page of the
crazy.
Sunday New York Times. So I got a quarter
Wow.
page visibility in the New York Times,
Wow.
and that was really sort of a wild thing. And I never really, I was always dumbfounded, like why they never even called me,
Isn't that
to
crazy?
verify it.
Wow.
And so 9 months later, it happened again. I did it again. And I sold a property, sent it into the New York Times. It was like a school. The first one was a building in
Right.
Gramercy Park, which was like a historic district with a lot of artists and musicians historically. And then the other one was on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. It was a school being converted to something else. And, so it was like a, good human interest story.
Sure.
And, news. And I wrote it in like like I wrote more about the history of the properties. And
Okay.
so I guess the New York Times liked that. And what I did, it's interesting, many years later, I never really ever, once these articles were written and I submitted them and they got on the front page of the Sunday real estate section, I never read them after that. Like I never read them. And like it's just something I did, it's there, and I'm moving on.
So,
And
so how long did it take you to start getting calls and start getting clients from those
oh,
articles?
that's a wild story. See, that's where I started to learn about how marketing and sales really works, right?
Right.
So the first time, one of the guys, somebody called me and said, "Hey, check out the New York Times. You're on the front page." I went and got the copy of the paper. I look at it. I'm like, I got a quarter page visibility. Like, I don't know how much that would cost, but it cost
Right.
me nothing.
That's crazy.
And so I'm like, oh man, I'm going to make a fortune. I'm going to walk in tomorrow morning. I can't wait till Monday morning because everybody in New York City that's got a building, like a 5-story building, of which there's millions of them, is going
Right.
to be calling me to sell their building. And I didn't get one phone call.
Wow. Okay.
And I was like, wow, that is a big wow. I was like, wow, this is strange. So I figured, well, maybe people are busy. Maybe they'll call me on Tuesday. And then
Right.
nothing happened Tuesday, nothing happened Wednesday, nothing happened that whole week. We got into the weekend, going into the following week. I'm like, nobody's going to remember what they read a week ago. And so anyway, back to, cold calling and all that kind of stuff to try and dig up business. And about a month later, I got this phone call from a guy we used to work in these small little micro markets in this city. At least
Okay.
we call them territories.
Sure.
And there was a guy who owned a building who I had called numerous times. And I had really nice conversations with him about the market, what's happening in his neighborhood and that kind of thing. And which was a really big deal because, back then, you get hung up a lot and
Right.
hung up
Right.
on a lot. And this guy's, we're having nice conversations. Anyway, I get a phone call from him, and he calls me up and he says, "Hey, Ed, this is so and so," and I'm like, "Yeah, I know who you are." Thinking that's what I'm thinking. I know who you are. I just spoke to you like 2 weeks ago. And he called me. He didn't know who I was. He didn't know my name. And I'm thinking, this is really weird. I've spoken to you so many times. We've had so many nice conversations. You don't even know who I am. And he said, I was so and so, who I don't even know who that so and so was, said, you're the guy to talk to sell my building. I want to sell my building. And I'm thinking, this is happening real fast. It's very unusual. And I'm thinking, you're calling me to sell your building. You don't even remember one phone call. You don't even know my name. I don't know who this person is that recommended you. And I
Wow.
ended up getting the business. But that's when it was like that was my first real hands-on experience. I've got tremendous media visibility, and this is how things are happening. And it just really dawned on me that, the way marketing and sales really works is it's a process. of staying
Right.
in front of people over and over and over. And
Right.
you think that people, you're thinking about yourself, but nobody's thinking about you. They're thinking about themselves.
Right.
And so, what we learned, early on was that it wasn't about us trying to beat our chests and saying, "Hey, here we're great, we can help you." It's what it's all about them. What can
Right.
we all the content is for them, not to promote us. And that's something I learned. I learned that you have to put yourself in the shoes of that consumer. And if you give them the information, if you give them market information, success stories, what it does is it amplifies the proof and the trust. And what it does is it overcomes consumer doubt. I mean, that's what I figured out along the way, is that what stands between the seller and the buyer is consumer doubt. And if you want to build, like, the proof creates the trust, but the only way to move the consumer from, position of doubt or skepticism is with proof. And you've got to keep stacking that proof over and over. And so this is something I figured out. I still didn't really get it. It took like 30 years
Right.
to get it.
Right.
And that's, well, long story short, there's so many things that happened along the way, and I started to develop a formula that emanated from that first New York Times article. Coincidentally, what was interesting is that same basic template that I created, that I used to create the first New York Times article, worked on Google as well. So I'm like, this is
Yeah.
really interesting.
And that's the cool thing, So you have a book on Amazon. It's called Proof Stacking. It's a great read. It's an easy read. I mean, it's not like War and Peace. You can easily read it in an afternoon or an evening. But it's dense. It's full of some great information. And the thing I like about this is you took the one or the few incidents that you had of success with the real estate buildings in the New York Times, overwhelming success, might I add, but you made it into a system. And in reading your book, you have really fleshed out all the nuances of this whole system, of this whole concept, into a really cool system that, like you said, anybody can use. And I mean, just in listening to you talk there, marketing is staying top of mind, staying front and center in front of the consumer's mind. And that's, nothing does that better than radio, right? I mean, that's the whole marketing that's on radio. I feel that a lot of people today are hooked on the pay-per-click marketing. They're hooked on the Facebook ads. They're hooked on, I spent this much, I got this many clicks, I got this result. And that's not as easy to see sometimes with maybe radio branded advertising, right? My question, I guess one of my first questions, I guess, would be, does proof stacking take a regular sales process and kind of slow it down and maybe make it a little bit longer? Or does it take an already kind of slow, long process and just make it better? Is it a
Well,
combination of
you know
both?
what it does is you think about everybody that is a buyer out there. We're all buyers of something, right?
Right,
And
right,
how many times are people, how many things are we bombarded with all day long where they're trying to sell us something hard?
right,
Like,
right,
like as if I'm a buyer right there, and they're going to try and squeeze that. We're going to take somebody who doesn't want to buy anything and convince them that they need to buy something. I'm going to squeeze some money out of them and make a sale.
right,
And that's, I mean, the majority of people that are soliciting me, that's how they approach it.
right,
But it doesn't work that way.
right,
What you need to do is you need to really define your market. So it doesn't matter whether you're in a local town and you're using Google, your website, and getting the visibility on Google with search engine optimization, or you're posting on social media, or you're, advertising on the radio. The key is consistency. You
right,
know, you
right,
have to have a message. You have to have a clear message, and you have to have a lot of different ways to say the same thing over and over and over. And even if you're in the
Interesting.
radio world, if your message is really, really clear and you're sort of saying the same thing over and over, just many different ways, the audience is going to recognize you. They're going to trust your voice, or they're going to trust your message. And really what you're doing with the one-page case studies is you can follow the same format, because we know that the New York Times loved it. We know that Google loves it. And it comes down to human behavior. How do people respond? So you could follow the same model and you could apply it to the radio too. It doesn't really matter what it is. It's just a way of communicating and creating trust. And that's really what it's all about.
Yeah, and that is it. Again, I was doing done a quick read through your book, but it's one that deserves a lot of time, because you unpack a lot of things. Like, for example, talking about trust. It's a combination of credibility and consistency, and you said even use the word intimacy of just, not necessarily in a romantic sense, but just a familiar sense, letting somebody in to do business with them. You also had I think you had a Zig Ziglar quote in there, which is a really good quote of, if people like you, they'll talk to you. If they trust you, they'll buy from you.
Exactly.
And that is so powerful. And I think that for radio people who are going out and meeting advertisers and trying to sell them on something, and it is a tough thing, because in that trust equation, you had all of those things are over, divided, but in this formula that you have in there, it's divided by self-interest. At the end of the day, they can trust you, but they still have to know that you are acting in their self-interest and not just your own. And I think that's a huge block with radio people, is that this guy's like, well, this guy just wants to sell me a year's worth of ads, and then he's going to come back a year later, whether they work or not, or a year's worth of airtime. And I think that's something that radio people really, especially get new people selling out there, maybe a stumbling block for them. But you in your book, you spend a lot of time talking about doubt, and you say doubt is it's not the barrier. It's actually, doubt is your friend. Doubt's the jumping off point for the sales process. Did I butcher that, or is that close to being
No,
right?
you're right on. You're right on. There's actually a phenomenal book called Breakthrough Advertising, written years ago by a guy named Eugene Schwartz, and he talks about the 5 steps of consumer awareness.
Right.
Like, if you understand that, you really start to understand how people, what makes people tick and makes people
Right.
buy.
Right.
And it's a process of taking somebody from like an unaware that they need what you've got, and taking them through all these different steps to get them to being a buyer. Now, if you're trying to deal with someone who is, let's say on the scale of 0 to 5, 0 being the most unaware, to 5 being, okay, I'm the most aware and I'm ready to buy. If you try and deal with somebody who's at a level 3, they're not really sure, but you're trying to treat them like a level 5, like they're ready to buy, you're going to push them away.
Right. Right.
They're not going to buy, even if they
Right.
want what you've got. So you're better off to, like, if you were in radio, the way I would do it, if I was like a radio, knowing what I know today,
Right.
what I would do is, just sort of following the model. What I might do is take some clients of the radio station who are already advertising with you, and say, hey, look, this one's working with us. This is the frequency of their advertising. Here's how many, people we get. Oh, here's another one. This one does, and just show them the proof. We've got
Right.
this person buying from us, and this person, and this person, and this person. And now you're not trying to sell. You're just showing the proof, like making them feel like, hey, it's safe to jump in the water,
Right. Right.
And that way you don't, and you got to be sensitive as a salesperson as to what level that person is,
Right.
because if you got to know, a good salesperson is going to know when it's time to close that deal,
Right.
or if you say something and you push them away, okay, well, how can I bring them back?
Right.
You know,
Right.
and because that's what goes on in sales, right? You can move. It's not just a linear line goes from 0 to 1 to 3, 4, 5, and they buy. Sometimes they get up to level 4. Something spooks them. They got another question. They back off.
Right.
Now, now you got to move them up. You know, based on another question or doubt that they have.
Right.
And so what you need to understand is these mechanisms, utilizing, you know, what I call it the one-page case study, but there's so many different ways to use it. You know, it's a
Right.
tool that you know you want to put it in front of people, let them convince themselves
Right.
to the point where they're saying, you know, I like to say this that. You know, there's a quote from a guy named Gary Vaynerchuk, very successful marketer, and
Hmm.
he says, when you're building a brand, there is no selling; the clients come to you. Well,
Right.
I like to say, when you're proof stacking, when you're stacking the proof, there is no selling; the clients come to you, and that's really my experience when you're doing it the right way and you're delivering that proof. You can see people nodding.
Hmm.
And a lot of times, I'm telling you, 9 out of 10 times, they're going to say, okay, when can we start?
Right.
It's such an amazing thing when you understand that mechanism and how to use it, how to use proof. And sometimes it's, you know, in the form of a success story, or sometimes it's like some market information, like maybe, you know, if you're in radio sales, you know, you're going to have stats. You know, I'm
Right.
sure I don't know radio, but I'm sure there are metrics just like any other,
Right.
you know, medium. And there are certain times a day where you get a certain amount of
Right.
audience or a certain time of audience. Your audience probably changes, you know, throughout the day. You have people that are driving to work. You have people that are coming home from work. You have people at work.
Right.
You know, so you have different audience at different times based on what's on that particular time of day, right?
Yeah, no,
And
absolutely. And I think that's something too that you list in your book. And I think you said at one point you don't write case studies, you kind of piece them together, you assemble
yeah,
them, right?
yeah,
And you have all these different building blocks that people can look, and it's not just a testimonial, right? It could be, like you said, statistics or any other number of things that they can use to kind of piece that in and build the testimonial or build the one page case study for them. The thing I like about what you do is it's kind of the Dan Kennedy model. Or I've heard him say this too, like Bannercheck, is that you know, it does. It's such a great tool for salespeople. You know, I think so many salespeople get out there and they're on their own, you know, having to think on their feet and all that. This gives people a really great tool to lean on. You can find out what somebody needs, what their hang up is, and show them proof without having to convince. Like I think you said in your book, no amount of convincing is going to change somebody who's doubting. Right? They just got to see proof. And you know, I did a podcast on Cialdini, Robert Cialdini's book Influence last week, and this ticks the major boxes in that of social proof. You know, of people wanting to follow the crowd, also of a little bit of a little bit of reciprocation in there. You're giving people all this information in front that they can take and use somewhere else. I remember one guy I worked with once. He said he would go around and give people quotes, and he said, "Well, even if you don't use my quote, you know, you can use it to get a better deal from your current supplier." I thought that was a great line, you know, and it just shows a willingness to help people. As now you have a workshop coming up. Is it on the 18th? Is that correct here?
I think it's the 19th. I think it's next Wednesday.
The 19th on Wednesday. We're recording
Yeah.
this on the 11th. It's going to go live on the 13th. But so if you're late, he's doing a live workshop on how to put all of this together into a one-page case study. And I just think for radio people, this is such a great thing. Now, let me ask you this: if somebody does not have a case study, I mean, maybe we're talking to people outside of the radio world. What do you recommend for somebody to get? What's their shortcut? What's their way to get marketing together so that they can start using this technique in their own line of work?
Yeah, it depends on your market, but one of the things that overcomes consumer doubt and establishes you as an expert is valuable information that will help that consumer. Things that
Right.
they might want to
Right.
know.
Right.
Like I don't know, let's say you were in the bathroom remodeling business,
Okay.
and you're just getting your business rolling, and you've been working for somebody else, and you don't have any case studies of your own, any success stories of your own. You could put together content about what you need to know about countertops. What do you need to know about, you know, building out a shower? What the pans that prevent leakage, and things about how to choose a faucet. How to
Right.
choose a toilet, how to choose, the bars and the mirrors and the lights.
Right.
Things that are valuable things that a person who is looking to remodel a bathroom or a kitchen would want to know. So
Right.
you don't have to say we did this job. You could say when choosing a mirror for your bathroom, here's the options and this is what you should consider. Maybe a ceiling fan. Like here are the best kind of ceiling fans that you should think about, for your bathroom when you're remodeling your bathroom. Well, you're not showing a case study, but it is a case study. I call them case studies because they're information or success stories. So now what you're doing, I mean, think about it if you're a bathroom remodeler and you put together little guides, and you could, let's say you get the lead, somebody is thinking about remodeling their bathroom or their kitchen, and you could show up and you've got a series of little guides that will help them
Right.
with their choices. Because I'm this is really close to home because I've been through this in the last couple of years. Um, where I wasn't getting any information. I couldn't find
Right.
any information. Nobody had it. The contractors just showed up. Yeah, we build bathrooms, we build kitchens. It's like, nobody showed me any proof. I didn't know. I was on my own. I didn't know what to do. But imagine if you were a kitchen remodeler and you had all these little guides that would help people make their decision. Really interesting because now you don't have to go far and wide and travel from town to town to do bathroom or kitchen remodels. You're going to get so much business right in one town because you're providing so much great information. And so now it changes your business model because you're going deep into a market rather than wide.
Right.
Because and the
Yes.
word of mouth is great because you're educating people without selling. They're going to talk about you. They're going to do the selling for you. So
Right.
if you don't have a success story, well, go to plan B. There's great information that you can provide, but it goes back to the beginning, which is what proof stacking is all about. It's all about the consumer. What is going to help them? And today, there's really no excuse for anybody because we can create all kinds of guides using AI very quickly.
Right.
There's so many amazing tools out there, and even though people have access to this like ChatGPT and other tools, they're really not utilizing it.
Right.
They can use it, but they don't know how to apply it.
And
And
that is very yeah, Chad. If you people might have stayed away from this in the past because like, oh, I can't write. I don't like writing. I don't want to do that. Man, Chat GPT or Grok or Claude or any of those can whip something up as soon as you hit the send button, right? The other cool thing I like about this is so much of the selling process, and I think this is the biggest waste that people in any sort of business lose the most money by not properly following up. And this model where you can come up with just a different piece of content for each email. It changes it from, hey, are you still thinking about it? Hey, have you changed your mind yet? Hey, we have a new sale. Hey, all this, all that may be relevant. Yeah, maybe they have been waiting for a sale to drop or something, but it gets pesky. But when you're delivering, like you said, delivering value and delivering information, it kind of makes it seem like, hey, I was just thinking about you, thought you might want to see this, and it keeps you top of mind. And maybe they have bought from somebody else. Maybe they'll regret it. Maybe they'll change their mind, or like you said, maybe they'll pass it along. It's interesting. Like at the beginning of this episode, you were talking about the guy that you had talked to several times, but you weren't on his radar until he heard about you from somebody else. And that's one of the most fascinating things about humans, right? And this just opens all sorts of doors to make that possible. I really love what you've put together here. One thing too, I did want to ask you about is the 5 1s that you listed in your book. And I think that too is another thing, especially for radio people, for focusing themselves and focusing their client, their advertiser on a way to do business. A lot of people, salespeople, are afraid to be too pushy, but when you can help the client focus on one target, on one time period they're going to devote to that target, and on one course of action, man, nobody else in your market is doing that, I promise you. And when you're the guy showing up doing that, it's like cheating, isn't it?
Well, it is. It is. That was something that I don't remember where I learned that, and it took me a while for it to really connect with me. But you think about when you send an email to somebody, and let's say you have 2 things to talk about. If you send 2 things, that might create confusion, because now the brain has to think about this and it has to think about that. But if you send an email just on one thing, one specific thing, it's a little bite-sized thing that people can just sink their teeth into. There's no confusion. There's no doubt. It's like, boom, there's this one thing. You're better off to send 2 emails, one on this thing, one on the second thing, separately, than trying to stick them both together. And that's one of the key things in the in the 5 1s, is that focus on one thing. Don't try and stick 2 things together, even though it's the tendency is for salespeople is like, I want to give you more. I don't want to give you more. Sometimes you're better off to give more in single bits,
right,
than all at once. That's sort of the concept of the 5 1s. I mean, this is all about communicating with people. And, today you've got to communicate in a way that people will remember you, that you've got to be so clear, because everybody is online. They're watching TV, they're on the radio, they're on their mobile phone, they're driving around, they see ads everywhere they go. I mean, like, you're getting bombarded by everybody trying to sell you something. Thousands and thousands of things every day. How are you going to stand out? And it's not about trying to jam something, like I said in the beginning, it's not about trying to force a sale down somebody's throat.
Right.
I
think this is super powerful. Just so everybody knows, I mean, Ed has this workshop coming up. He didn't reach out to me. I reached out to him because I've seen his stuff for a while. I think it's just one of those things that no matter what industry you're in, as far as a salesman, if you incorporate this into your pitch, into your sales process, if you're a business owner, whatever you are, man, it's just such an easy thing. It'll take a little effort. It'll take some work, but it separates you from everybody else in your office, everybody else in the industry, everybody else in your town. And it's just such an easy thing that clients will love. I think it's honestly like a hack, the closest thing I've seen to one that anybody can have and just to have in their arsenal. And it's a great tool to lean on. It's just such a wonderful thing to have in your pocket. I always thought that stories were the best objection overcomers. Somebody gives you an objection, and you always want to come back with facts. And, well, did you know this? Did you know this? And you can just say, you know what, that may be the truth, but this guy did it this way with us last year, and he got these results. And when you can do it, that's what what proof stacking is. It's proof, it's actual evidence, and it's a story, and it does all the work for you.
Yeah, and it's it's so ridiculously simple. Like, for example, I'll give you an example. Let me give you a case study.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah, give me a
So
proof second case study.
I'm going to give you a case study, right? So I'm going to tell you how I make my coffee in the morning.
Okay.
All right. So what I do is I have I grab my my water, you know, thing, and I go into my little filter maker and I fill it up to like line number 8. Boom. That's the first thing I do. The second thing I do is I pour that water carefully so that I don't spill it into the spout. The next thing I do is I get out my, environmentally friendly filter and I put it in. Then I grab, here's the fourth step, I grab my little jar of my fresh ground coffee and I take 4 scoops and I put it right in. I hit this, I close it, I hit the start button, I go grab my coffee mug, I grab my almond milk, put it down on the counter, I turn on the news. By that time, the coffee's just about ready. I pour it in my cup. There you go. There's a case study. Done.
Right.
That's a
Right.
case study. That's
Right.
all you need. I don't care what you're doing. What we try and do is we try and, it's a headline, has to be very clear. We try and create headlines that tell what the story is about. Sort of
Right.
like a cover of a book. Very simple. And I try and teach, or the way I teach it is, what would you say? What would you write in the sand if you were stuck on a desert island and you wanted to get rescued?
Oh, it's great.
Help, right? Or SOS.
Right.
But you're not going to say, hey, I'm stuck down here. Would somebody come save me? No, help.
Right.
So
Right.
you have to be clear. And
Right.
then, if you're creating a one-page case study, a little bit of an introduction, people probably aren't going to read it. They might glance, but they're not going to read. And then we go into the bullet points. Bullet points with a bold word to start each point, because people's
nice.
eyes are going to go from the headline to understand what it's about, and their eyes are going to go right down to the bullet points. 6 bullet points. Boom. That's the rest of the stuff, supporting photos and all that. People might, read some other content later, but that's all you need. You only need a little bit of proof. And I'll tell you an interesting story about how I figured this out, because I was trying to create the character of the consumer. And when my kids were little, they used to watch the Polar Express. It was an
Right.
animated film, right? It was a
Right.
Christmas movie. And when I came up with the proof stacking concept, and I was thinking about what is the character of a person that doubts. And I went and I remember watching that movie with my kids, and I went and I watched that movie like 10 times with my notepad. And I started to write down all the different lines in the movie. And it was all
Right.
about this kid's journey up to the North Pole. And
Right.
he didn't believe, he wanted to believe in Santa, but he just wasn't getting there. And that's sort of how the consumer went. And that's what I learned about the way people, about people. They want to believe, so you don't have to give them a lot, but you just got to keep dripping on them a little bit and a little bit, and you got to keep going until they finally get to the point, and it's like, I believe, or I want to buy from you. It's sort of interesting. It's an interesting story. That's where I really figured out, where I really started to understand the consumer. It took a lot of pieces to put this together, but if you ever watch it, you'll see
Right.
that the Polar Express, you could take the whole Christmas theme out of it. And what it was they created like the theme of human nature. And they just
Yes.
put a Christmas theme over the top to make a movie out of it.
Right.
And it's sort of interesting.
It's very interesting. It's fascinating. It is human nature, right? And you said that in the book, which I thought was really good. As skeptical as people are, they want to believe, right?
They want to
And
believe.
I remember I used to do sales. I was one of those guys that would go to the Sam's Club and do the demonstrations and sell the knife kits, and stuff like that, and hand them out there. It was a memorized script, right? But my favorite part of that is you'd see some guy come over there and he'd start off with his arms like this. And then a few minutes in, you're showing him proof, right? The whole thing we do is proof. And he's like this. And then finally at the end, he's like this, give me this, that. And that to me was always just the most fascinating thing to see. What point did he flip over? What really got him? Just to watch a human mind do that transformation in 5 or 10 minutes was always a blast to me. And I think that there's a couple of different things. One, I can see that proof stacking keeps you from being a commodity, right? You were looking for a bathroom remodeler. You needed one. You need a mechanic. You need a plumber. You need all these things, and you're afraid of making the wrong choice and getting burned. Everybody has horror stories about that. With radio sales, I think it's a little different thing. And I think that the thing is, so with proof stacking in that world, you can separate yourself from the crowd. And as you also mentioned in the book, you can probably charge more too, because you're giving them more value, if only the value of peace of mind. In the radio world, they don't have to spend their money with you, their advertising dollars. They know they got to advertise, but radio seems like a little bit of a long shot. It's not like it was when back in the 20th century, which seems so long ago right now. Where it was the big medium, right? It was everybody was listening to radio, or if they weren't watching TV, So now it's this thing of you're not separating yourself from the crowd in that way of standing out from a whole bunch of choices of the same person. It is very much a Polar Express analogy, is you're inviting that person on an adventure. And to me, that's why, and maybe in this industry more than anything else, what you do is so powerful, just to get somebody to make that step. And all the things that you teach in the book, from the 5 1s to the trust factor to you go over the Eugene Schwartz pyramid, everything that you teach in there, and plus the nuts and bolts of how to put these things together. Man, it's so powerful. And I think it's just something that when somebody in this industry stumbles on it and uses it the right way, it's going to make a huge difference. It's going to be a game changer.
It is. It's really, it's such a nice thing to see somebody who becomes disarmed.
Right. Yes.
It's so, because it's really painful, trying to convince somebody that is got, their guard up is really, really hard.
Right.
It's some people can do it. Some people they're okay with that kind of sales.
Right.
For me, that does not work well for me. I'd rather put something in front of somebody and have them nod. Put something, and if they don't want it, I'll come back.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And, it's just, it's interesting, I mean, we could talk forever on this, but, one of the things that I do is I run a fair amount of Facebook ads for my business. And the one thing that is so interesting about Facebook that it applies to this whole concept of human nature and what makes people buy. I never, ever sell anything, even a $37 course about how to do something amazing. I never sell anything off the ad. I get people onto the sales page, I give them something free, and I get them in my email pipeline. And then I follow up with like a proof stacking strategy. And I have seen people who have gone to my, who they're on my email list, they're getting my emails, they will click a link, they'll go over and they'll go right up to the checkout, ready to buy, and then they back off.
Mm-hmm.
A month later, might happen again. Sometimes, I just saw somebody who bought a program, something for me, it was a $37 course. Took almost 2 years. Almost 2 years ago, they were interested. I got them in the list. And so many times I've looked at them and they've gone to different parts of the sales page. Numerous times they've gone to the checkout page. And then even on the last day, the day that they finally purchased, I saw them go at like 8:30 in the morning. They went back at 1:30 and they finally pulled the trigger at 6 o'clock.
Well, yeah, the thing is, they didn't want to miss out on your follow-ups, because your email follow-ups are great because it's proof stacking in action, right? You're getting the course right there in a way if you pay attention. But yeah. No, and I've actually been that guy probably before too on multiple things. But yes, proof stacking, if you just stay, it's such a non-threatening way to stay in front of somebody too. If only out of curiosity, they're going to open your emails, and they're going to get value from it. And they'll probably, if they're in sales, be thinking, man, how much more would I have now if I'd been doing this, 2 years ago? So it's
Yeah.
all great stuff. And a few people, hopefully, a lot of people will see this before you have your workshop on the 19th of March, 2025. What are you going to cover in that workshop? So if people want to attend, they can go over to your website and sign up for that.
Yeah. Well, you can sign up at onepagecasestudies.com, the number one.
Okay.
Use number one pagecasestudies.com. You can get there that way.
Awesome.
What I'm going to do is I'm not going to do a PowerPoint, boring PowerPoint type thing. I'm just going to get right into the nitty gritty of it.
Oh,
Here's the
nice.
story. Let me tell you the quick story, the New York Times thing. Here's the template that works on New York Times, works on Google, works everywhere. Okay, well, you got that concept. We understand the doubter. We understand that you as a salesperson, you're a proof stacker. You got to be in the mindset of a proof stacker. We're going to try and, the goal is to convert that doubter to a believer. Okay, so we
Right.
got that concept. That's done. All right, now let's get into it. Let's take a look at different scenarios, case after case after case. Let me show you about this one and this what we did on this one and why it worked. Let's take a look at this scenario and why this worked
Oh, that's
and what
awesome.
it
Very
produced.
cool.
So I'm going to take you through like the real life. Here's how you do it. Here's how we create strategies, right? One of the things that, a big part of this is, identifying your market, understanding who your consumer is. And one of the things that I always do, and I actually did a training on this today. One of the things that I do is I'll go over to Google and I will type in a search term. And then what I'll do is I'll go over to Google Images. And then I can see all the images right there. Because what I like to do with the images is I like to see what are the images? What are the images saying? And Google Images is a really big thing. It helps you get a mental picture. What are your competitors doing? What is Google featuring in images? What kind of wording are people using on their images? And it really helps you, think about that consumer. And another thing, I didn't really get into it in the book. I wanted to. But, I'll give you a quick scenario is if you go look at every tire site, tire for your car site,
Right.
it's all about discount, discount, discount. We're the cheapest in town.
Commodity. Right.
Okay? That's every single one in the country does that.
Right.
Why don't, it's like in my mind, it's like, why don't you create a block of images?
Yeah.
And let's say 4 images across and 5 down, 20 images. And one is an SUV, one is a Porsche, one is a minivan, another is a Jeep.
Right.
We help you find the right tire for your car.
Right.
Boom. That completely different. It doesn't talk about price. What it does is it shifts the whole focus into you, the consumer, not competing on price. We're not here to compete on price and try and draw you in like everybody else. We're here really as a consultant to help you get the right tire for your car. It's
That's
a
great.
completely
Yeah.
different way of looking at it, but we're focused on the consumer. So if you're selling radio advertising, let's think about who that consumer is and how are we going to create your message? We have the audience on our radio show. Here's the audience. Here's what we have during the day. We have, maybe 12 blocks of an hour, let's say. And each hour is somebody different talking about something else different. So each one of those blocks is potentially a different audience. So how does your product fit into each one of those blocks? So there may be some blocks where you don't want to advertise, but how do we, instead of making you a commodity, how do we appeal to that consumer and speak in their language rather than your language? That is a big, big part of this whole strategy. And when you start to think about that, there's a great website. There's a guy up in Boston. He's worth a couple $1 billion. His name is Herb Chambers, herbchambers.com.
Okay.
If you go to herbchambers.com and look at his website, right at the very top, the message of his site is, we don't sell cars. We help people find the right car, the right car, or something like that. We don't sell cars. We help you buy the right car. So what he's doing is, everybody else is trying to come on down, cheapest price on town,
right.
25 cars left. That's it. We're gonna,
Right.
that kind of thing. He's looking at it and saying, it's almost like putting his arm around you. Come on, I'm going to help you buy the right car. Let's figure it out together.
Right.
And just that quick little message. And so, like, when you think about the consumer rather than you, it changes the way you approach the market and how your message, because the message is so key. Messaging, getting the right message in front of the right audience. I would think, I don't know radio, but I'm sure that that's probably how it works. You have different consumers at different times of day. Sometimes your product, sometimes reputation and brand building, but you can say the same thing so many different ways.
Right.
And that's how, if I was going to go out and try and sell radio, and knowing what I know from the whole proof stacking one-page case study thing, that's what I would do. And that's really interesting, because if you're going to talk to somebody who wants to sell their products and advertise on the radio, let's go in and talk to those people and tell me about your product. Tell me about your consumer.
Right.
Let's
Tell me about your
break it down
consumer.
to all the
Yes.
different consumers. I mean, not everybody's the same.
Yeah. Yeah. You said
Let's
that.
figure out who your audience is and what's going to connect with that audience, and how we can craft messaging that's going to connect with that particular consumer, because we have those consumers, but we have different consumers at different times of day. So that's a way that you could really, really differentiate yourself and really connect.
Yes. And having the consumer and knowing the consumer. I think you said something about how empathy for the consumer was one of the greatest tools you can have. Empathy for your prospect is one of the greatest tools you can have as a salesperson. I think it's absolutely right. When you can, I can't remember who the author was, but he said, when you can.
Steve Pressfield.
Yeah, well, yeah, right. The War of Art, right? And what was the other book that you quoted? Stephen Pressfield is great.
Yeah, it was Nobody Wants to Read. I'll refrain from the language, but nobody wants to read your,
Read
and the whole
what
concept,
you wrote, basically. Right.
The concept is, would you read what you just wrote?
Would you exactly?
And that's
very good.
And when you start to put yourself in the position of the consumer, it really, really makes you think about who the consumer is. And that's the key to sales. I mean, if you want to sell more, you got to know who you can't just be one thing, otherwise you're just like pushing big rocks up a hill.
Right.
This is we want to use leverage,
Yes. It's so great. Well, I only asked you to have a 30-minute conversation. Thank you for sticking around for the full hour. I do appreciate you.
My pleasure.
Again, it's the number one page casestudies.com is Ed's site to learn how to do all of this. Wednesday, March 19th, 2025, he's going to have a workshop coming up. It's free to attend, right? You just sign up and attend it. I will be there. The other thing is that if you missed that date, still go check out One Page Case Studies and check out his book on Amazon. It's called Proof Stacking. Great read. I would say you can read it in easily one sitting, but I highlighted so much stuff in there. It's really good. You'll probably want to read it in a couple of sittings, but get this, no matter what you're in, if you're in radio, if you're in whatever sales you're in, make this a part of your arsenal right now. Separate yourself from the rest of the crowd and give your prospects what they really want, which is proof, and give them permission to believe in what you're selling. And is that pretty much it, Ed? Is that summarize?
That's it. If you you can do a search. Do a search for proof stacking.
Okay.
I pretty much own the whole page on Google.
That is awesome.
Everything's right there. There's tons of links, and if you want to track me down, and I'm pretty easy to find.
Very
just search
cool.
proof stacking or one page case studies. You'll find me on Google.
Awesome.
All over the place.
Well, good luck with the workshop. I appreciate your time today. Thank you very much for coming on here, Ed, and we'll have to do this again in the future.
Yeah, thank you for. I appreciate you listening and your interest. It's a fun topic, and hopefully I'll see you on Wednesday.
Sounds good. I look forward to it. Thank you, sir.